I attended a small, fundamental, Bible-believing church in Wichita, Kansas. And it was a good church. But living in that church for about 10 years, grown up in it, I came to understand that there were a lot of messed up people in our church. You know, you can't be in a church very long, but when you're interacting with people, you really get to know them and understand. We're messed up. We got a lot of messed up people in our church here. I knew a young lady who's a couple years younger than me who developed serious mental health problems. And if she's still alive today, she called me in a psychiatric facility someplace, okay? I witnessed that happening. I didn't witness it, but we had 3 couples that got married in a triple wedding in our church when I was probably 7 years old. And a few years later, one of those young ladies committed suicide. We had a little bit of domestic violence, somebody that had an alcohol problem. And I saw this stuff in the church and I thought, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, because my dad taught me that if anyone's in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away and all things are new. So why are we having all these problems in the church, and why are the church leaders not doing anything about it, see? And so the Lord put within me a passion, a desire to want to learn and help people. So I went off to college, got a 4-year degree in psychology, went on and got a master's degree in psychology, went on and got a specialist degree in counseling. And I went back, and I just kept going back to school because I just knew I needed more information. I just needed more. I didn't have enough, see? And I began to get into practice, and it was frustrating because I did my best. I even used the scriptures. I prayed with people, but I wasn't seeing people getting set free, see? And then I got a PhD in counselor education, and I got as much information as I could about what the world recommends and what they do to try to help people. But after 25 years, it just wasn't working very good. And then I went to a workshop out in Kentucky. It was put on by a pastoral counselor. And this guy was telling these amazing stories about people that he was seeing that were getting set free from anger, and grief, and shame, and depression. And I was amazed. And it made so much sense. And all this guy was doing was pray with people. But he's doing it in a very special way, see? And that's what I'm going to share with you today, about how to pray effectively about your emotions. And I've been using it the last 15 years, and I'm going to share kind of the basic things that I've learned and how you can learn to pray with people effectively and get rid of bad emotions that are weighing down in their lives. See, the Lord doesn't want us to get weighed down. He really doesn't. I mean, there's nothing wrong with grieving. It's normal. But when you get stuck there, it becomes a problem. It turns into depression. And lots of things happen. See, so, and it's normal to get angry. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you hang on to it very long, if you let the sun go down your anger, it turns into bitterness, and it will destroy your life. So that's what I learned from this pastoral counselor out in Kentucky. So my life was a failure for 25 years, honestly. I mean, I did my best, but all I had to work with was the theories of counseling in the secular world. But in practice, it didn't work out. And after I learned to do this ministry, it changed everything. I mean, I began seeing people getting well, and I began to learn how to use these principles more and more with more complicated cases. And the more I used it, the more excited I got about it. See, now in the past, it was just the reverse. I'd go to a workshop, I'd go to a seminar, and think, wow, this is good. And I'd go out and start using it. About 2 months later, I burnt out on it because it wasn't working better than what I was doing previously, see? And you go through years and years and years of training like that and trying to go to conferences and not learning anything that actually helps people. Let me give you a fact about the mental health system and about grief. It's a fact that 23 of the top researchers in the area of grief counseling came together about 2004. They wrote a report called I think it's called the Report on Bereavement and Grief. And these 23 top experts in the field of grief counseling concluded that nothing they were doing helped people get rid of grief. And yet there's all these grief schools out there that you go and specialize. Now, it's a wonderful specialty. I consider going for myself. But they agree that nothing they do helps people get rid of normal grief. Now, they have a technique that they came out with in 2005 for complicated grief. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That helps people a little bit, and it's a 16-week process, and it's very painful. You know, to talk about it all the time, every day, for 16 weeks. Can you imagine? And they reported that people felt a little better afterwards. But anyway, so it's amazing when you actually read the research and see how ineffective what the world is doing it is. Okay? But anyway, so that's the history I've come from. We're going to talk today about trauma. That's going to be the last topic we'll address, because when you deal with trauma, you have to deal with their emotions, each of their emotions. And traumatized people need help in identifying them and resolving them. And so as you meet with them, you need to let them, tell their story, kind of hear what they're talking about. You've got to listen to them. And when I listen to someone that I'm counseling, I'm listening, but I'm thinking, now what is the emotion this person's feeling right now? What is the emotion? I'm trying to identify what it is. And there's not hundreds of emotions. I've got 5 or 6 basic emotions I'm looking for. And as I'm listening, okay, boy, he's a little angry, okay? There's some anger there. And I make a note of that. Okay, here's anger. What else? What other feelings do you have? Well, there's some grief, okay? And I'll make a list. You've got to identify the separate emotions they have, and then one by one deal with those emotions they have. And so we're going to talk about trauma. But the 3 basic emotions that people experience more than anything else that you deal with, and in your own life as well, are grief and anger and shame. Now those are the 3 biggest ones. Now in addition to that, a 4th one I throw in is fear. And a 5th one might be sadness. There are other emotions, but those are the big emotions. We're going to talk about each of them today, about how you can help people with them. So I want to begin, first of all, by talking about grief, because grief is a significant issue that affects many people in life. Probably more than any other emotion is grief. Okay, let's start with grief. And let me tell you what I learned about grief. After I went to that seminar, that conference out in Kentucky, I went home and I was excited. And I wanted to begin to use this and learn how to experience it myself. And so I began using it, and as I began using the principles, I saw a lot of people start to get set free. Well, my wife and I moved from Iowa to Nashville, Tennessee, where our kids were living at the time, and I began working at a group home for boys where they send young men who are getting in trouble, getting in trouble for running away for drugs, and getting in fights and things like that. And there's a young man that came into this group home that we were notified before he arrived at the group home that he had just lost his best friend like 3 weeks earlier. And so when he arrived, I very quickly met him and sat down with him. I wanted to see if I could help him. And I asked him how he was doing. He said, not very good. He says, I think about him all the time. It was his cousin he lost that was like a brother to him. He was his best friend. They lived together. He said, I think about him all the time. I can't quit thinking about him. I can't sleep. And I said, well, if you could get rid of that grief, would you like to? Now that's a question I use a lot, by the way. Because you can't force anything on anybody if they don't want help. If they don't want to get rid of their anger, they're not going to. If they don't want to get rid of their grief, they're not going to. And if they're not ready to get rid of their grief, that's okay. See? I'll wait till they're ready. But he said he was ready. It had been 3 weeks. And he was hurt, he was tired of not sleeping, and he wanted some help. And I said, if you can get rid of it, would you like to? He said, yes. And I said, well, I can show you how to do that. And I said, there are 2 things that you need to do, basically. 2 things you've got to do. Number 1, you have to be completely honest. You know what Pastor Jim was talking about this morning? Honesty, you've got to be completely honest, okay? And by making a list of everything that you miss about your cousin. See, that's how you get honest. Think about it. If you can't be honest about that and talk about it or list what you miss about the person, basically you're just suppressing it. You can't get rid of emotion that you suppress. You've got to be honest and get it out. You lay it out on the table and you make a list of everything that you miss about that person. And so I asked him, I said, what do you miss about him? He said, I miss hanging out with him. I miss talking to him. I miss his sense of humor, the goofy things he said and did. He said, I miss hunting with him. I miss fishing. I started writing all this stuff down. Kept on going. Pretty soon I had a whole page full of things that he missed about his cousin. I said, well, that's good. That's a good list. That's being honest about your feelings. He said, now, The second step is this. It said, would you be willing to say a little prayer and tell God what you missed about your cousin and ask him to take it from you? He said, yeah. He said, I'm not a religious person, but I believe in God. I believe in prayer. So I said, okay, good enough. And I led him in prayer, and I just went down that list I made up, and I said, Lord, and he repeated after me. He said, Lord, when I think about my cousin, I miss hanging out with him. I miss talking with him. I miss hunting with him, miss fishing, I miss his sense of humor, the goofy things he said and did. We went down that entire list, and he repeated after me, and then at the end he said, Lord, I'm tired of carrying this, and right now I choose to give it to you. Please take this from me. In Jesus' name. And when he finished saying those words, I said, okay, I want you to think about your cousin now. Tell me how you feel. He said, you know, I feel a lot better. I said, good. He said, now I want you to think about your cousin, all those things you missed. I'm trying to stir it up. So he did. He sat there and he thought about it. And I said, how do you feel? He said, I don't feel anything. He said, I feel calm. I said, well, good. I said, let's see how that works for you. And I let him go back to his room. The next morning, I saw him outside mowing grass. And so I approached him. He turned off his lawnmower and I said, how are you doing? He said, you know what? He said, last night I slept for the first time in 3 weeks. I said, that's great. I said, now, have you been thinking about your cousin while you've been mowing the lawn? He said, yes. He said, but I'm only thinking of the good things about him now. And you know what? I checked up on this young man every week for the next 5 months while he was still there. And it never came back. He could talk about his cousin. He could look at pictures of him, and it didn't stir him up anymore. All right? He had good memories. He would think about him a lot. But the pain was gone, see? And you know what? That was the first time in 25 years that I had ever seen that. I'd seen a lot of people in counseling that had grief, but I'd never seen him want to get rid of it. Now, his grief was normal. This 3 weeks earlier. There's nothing wrong with that. But he was in pain, and he wanted out of the pain, and so he was very good. And he complied. You know what? Not only did he get set free, but his heart softened to God at that moment. He saw how good God is. He saw how compassionate God is, how much God loved him. He got saved a few weeks after that. And I've seen this works even with unbelievers like that, that people who are hurting, that you can approach them, you can show them how to get rid of the pain. They think about it. Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. He didn't say just believers. All who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest, okay? And then they get that rest and peace, and then you can talk about it. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? And they'll usually say, it's awesome. And then they start praying, people start going back to church, and all kinds, and they get come to salvation, sometimes on their own. But anyway, so that's where I got started. The first time I'd ever helped somebody with grief was with this young man. And so the outcome of the session, I have to hold the page up here because my bifocals don't let me see it. But the outcome of the session is there was the immediate termination of his emotional pain. He couldn't stir up the pain when thinking about it. He slept well the following night. He's able to talk about the loss and remember without any emotional pain. He had long-term peace and resolution and complete 100% peace regarding the loss. Now, if he told me the next day, he said, well, I feel a lot better, but I do still feel some grief, you know what I would have done? I would have said, well, we missed something. Because if there's still something there, it just means we missed something. You might need to go back over something in a little more detail. And then once you make another list up and do it, and give it to God, it's gone. See? So sometimes I have had to do it twice, even 3 times with somebody. I had an elderly lady who lost her husband after 50 years. Boy, did she have a lot of memories to go through, you know. We made a long list of it. She got all this healing. And then the next time I saw her, she was feeling a whole lot better. But she had some more things come up. We made another long list up. Because she had 50 years to give to God. And so sometimes you've got to go back, a second time. But once they give it all to God, it's God. Now, does that sound hard? Do you think you can do something like that? It's pretty simple, isn't it? A lot of people tell me, I have a lot of pastors who tell me that's just too simple. That can't possibly be. But God does things in a simple way. I mean, it's hard for us. But when God's at work, He does it in a simple way. It's amazing. You know what? Who gets the glory for it? Not me, not my 9 years of counseling, my 9 years of college. That didn't help at all. You know, the person that gets the glory is God, because it's prayer and it's the power of God that sets people free. Now let me tell you, bear in mind that what I mentioned, that the mental health professionals and the grief counselors in this world do not know how to help people get set free from grief. They don't know how. Many of them don't even know that they don't know how, because they don't know the research. But I can show you the research, you know, that this is what we're talking about. It is factual. So here are the steps for healing grief. 2 simple steps. Number 1, first be honest about your feelings of loss by making a detailed list of what you miss about the lost person. Detailed list. Secondly, tell the Lord what you miss about the person and ask Him to take your feelings from you and carry them for you. When I saw this happen to this young man, I knew that I was witnessing a miracle. Because I tried it for 25 years my way, using psychology and counseling, and it didn't work. It didn't do okay. Now you may not have that same benefit, but I knew it was a miracle. I knew this is not something that I could do on my own. And then when I got this report, that's when I read what the top researchers concluded, that it doesn't work. I mean, there's nothing that works. And so there's a follow-up research report in 2009 where one of the top researchers by the name of Robert Niemeyer did another study, and they found the same thing. They did a large study called a meta-analysis study, where they take 61 studies and kind of pull them together so they have a larger number of subjects, gives them more statistical strength and so forth, trying to find a little bit of effectiveness. And what they found was the same thing. Consistent with the majority of smaller scale reviews, our test of overall effectiveness failed to yield an overly encouraging picture of grief therapy, see? And that's an exact quote. And I can give you a reference if any of you are interested in looking that up. But you know what? That's very exciting to me. That's what we need. That's what Las Vegas needs, is miracles. That's what our world needs, our country, you know. And the problem in most churches, I mean, all the churches all around the country and around the world, is that we don't see much of that. We don't see much evidence of radical change in people's lives. You know, we struggle, we're Christians, we struggle, we have problems, we're messed up, like I said, and there's not a dramatic difference many times between believers and unbelievers. And so as a result, the world looks at it and says, you know, I'm not impressed. And it's hard to attract people to our churches when you don't see radical changes in our lives. But when you're stuck in your grief and you can't get over it, and you go 5, 10, 15 years, and then you have one prayer session that goes away, you sit up, you pay attention, you realize that is a miracle. We need miracles. The early New Testament church in Acts 2:43 says everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. They were witnessing these radical transformations in the early New Testament church. And I believe that's what we need today. And I believe today is the day. Come on. You know, as you all here, as you learn to do this, and you pray about your grief, and you pray with others about your grief, see, and you get rid of it, you'll see the power of God in action. And you can start sharing that with other people. And they'll get excited. They'll want to come to church to hear, how do I get rid of my grief, see? How do I get rid of my anger, and so forth. So this was revolutionary for me. It caused a revolution in my practice. And, you know, it's not just the immature people that need it. It's the mature people, too, the spiritual leaders many times that struggle with things. And I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to tell you a story I'd like to tell here, but I've seen lots of very mature Christian people that were stuck in grief, that were unstuck as a result of learning how to pray effectively about that. Now let me make some important points about what grief, some basic facts about grief. The first fact I want to establish is this, that grief is normal. Grief is normal. There's nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed about, you know, to experience grief. Now how do I know that's normal? Well, John 11. Jesus wept. That's right. And he wept because of his friend Lazarus who died. Now isn't that interesting? That Lazarus, his friend, died, and he knew he was going to resurrect him in a few minutes, and yet he wept. You know, so what's going on there, see? His sisters, Lazarus' sisters came out, Mary and Martha. And they both fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you've been here, Jesus, after the second time, it says he wept. He wept. You know what that emotion was? I think it was grief, it was sadness over the deep despair. I mean, the kind of despair you feel today here, you know, in the city, it's normal. It is okay. And weeping is okay. If the Son of God can weep, like Jim was saying this morning, you know, you need to weep. The scriptures say, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So there's nothing wrong with it. It is normal. That's the first fact you need to understand. The next basic fact about grief is this. Grief can be deeply, deeply painful. And especially like if you lose a child, or there's a violent death like you've had in this city, an unexpected death, that's especially painful. And you look through the scriptures and see a lot of evidence of this principle. You look at the life of David when he lost his son Absalom, and when he lost a child. And in both cases it says that David wept inconsolably. And then Joseph, who was a godly man in the book of Genesis, he wept over his father and kissed him. And the Egyptians wept for him for 70 days. And so it can be very, very painful. And many of you have experienced it. Some of you probably have not. But many of you have experienced the loss of somebody that's very painful. And even today when you think about it, it may stir up some bad feelings. So it can be extremely painful. Basic grief fact number 3 is this, that grief can result from all kinds of losses, not just deaths. So think about the losses you had in your life. Say, there are many kinds. Loss of life, loss of your health. As you get older, you notice things quit working. You notice that, Kevin? You know there's some grief involved. The more that happens, and you miss being able to do what you used to do. See? So loss of your health. People that have injured their backs and they can't work anymore. It's loss. It's grief. People who lost jobs. People who lost relationships. Now, many people have lost relationships. They've had a boyfriend in the past, or a girlfriend in the past. They've had a former spouse. Let me try this. Well, lots of help here. Those losses are just as real, can be just as debilitating as a death. Many people will tell you they've gone through divorce, and that was worse than the death they went through, because the person's still alive and just rejected them. They want to see them. So a lot of pain and a lot of grief associated with divorce. Wouldn't it be awesome if everybody that goes to this church who's been through a divorce gets total healing for that? Where they don't get stirred up about, you know, when they hear from that ex and things like that. Wouldn't that be awesome to be set free from that? But you'd be set free from all kinds of loss through the same principle that we're talking about here. Whatever loss it is, you can get rid of it through prayer. I had one man that lost his dream. And, you know, he was in a drug program because he'd been using meth for a number of years. Secretly, his wife and kids didn't know it. And he got caught one day and went into a treatment program. And as I talked to him about his past, he hadn't had any significant losses. You know, I couldn't find anything in his past that would explain to me why he was abusing drugs like he was. But finally it came down to age 17. He said, yeah, there was something that happened to me that was difficult. He said, he was an aspiring athlete. He was very, very good. And he had plans of being a Major League Baseball player. Apparently he was good enough that he probably could have made it. But at age 17, he hurt his pitching arm. And his life dream was lost right there. And then he began drinking. He decided to become a musician. He thought he was going to make it as a musician and form a little band and so forth. And 5 years later, they weren't going anywhere, wasn't making it big or anything. And he lost that dream too, see. And while he's in the clubs and so forth, he starts using meth. And he has had a good job, but he just wasn't doing what he wanted. He had a dream he lost, see. And we had to pray about that. We had to pray about that and give that to God. Now, everything he missed about that dream, he gave it to God. And then he's okay. He realized what a fool he was being. He was about to leave his wife and everything, but he suddenly realized, once he got rid of that grief, he realized he had a wonderful wife. And that marriage is restored. Now, that's wonderful. So you see how God restores. I mean, that's a miracle, Ken. And so all kinds of losses that can lead to problems. The loss of home. We lost our home in a tornado 2 years ago. My son was there with me. When the tornado came, he looked out the window and saw it coming right toward our house. And we ran for a storm shelter and got in and came out a few minutes later and half of it was gone. And it wasn't terribly difficult for me, but it can be. It can be. And the Lord replaced that with a nicer home, so we're grateful to Him for that. So any kind of loss can be traumatic. I had a lady who was referred to me because she was an alcoholic. Her friend told me, that referred to me, told me that she had been drinking for 25 years, and that it began when she went through a divorce. Her husband left her for another woman. So she came to me, and I met with her and talked with her, and she said, yeah, that's right. I said, that's when it all began. And I asked her if she'd like to get rid of that. I said, how do you feel when you think about your husband now? And she said, well, I still miss him. I was kind of dumbfounded. I would have been mad, but she missed him. And I said, would you like to get rid of that? She said, yeah. We made up a list of the things she missed about her husband. And we prayed, she gave it to God. And after that, she said, well, I feel good. I feel okay. I feel calm and peaceful. The following week, she came back, and I said, how you doing? She said, well, I don't miss him anymore. He said, but now I'm mad at him. She said, she had all that grief on top of that, and she couldn't even recognize the anger was there because of all the grief. We prayed about the grief and gave that to God. And she was set free. She quit drinking, and that was it. The Lord can set people free when they learn how to pray effectively about their emotions. Basic grief fact number 4 is that grief can be debilitating. Professionals call grief that is debilitating, they call it complicated grief. Sometimes they call it prolonged grief, a few other names, but complicated grief is when you have grief for over 6 months and every day you're still thinking about that person, you're crying every day, they define that as complicated. It's a pretty arbitrary standard, but they call it complicated. And it can be very debilitating. The research says that about 15% of all losses become complicated. So that means 85% of the time people, that you lose, you just kind of gradually overcome it and you get back to normal, say. But 15% of the time is when it becomes complicated and people need help with it, see. And I had a man that was referred to me by a doctor. I was working in a facility right next to a hospital. And I knew this Christian doctor with a hospital, and he had a man come to him. He was an elderly man in his 70s, and I say elderly, I got to be careful about that now. I'm getting close. And but anyway, he came to me, and the doctor said, I tried to help this guy, but he couldn't quit crying. We couldn't have an exam. He couldn't quit crying. So he sent him to me. And I sat down with him. He was pretty torn up. He had a 36-year-old daughter that had just died like 6 months earlier, and he's still grieving over it. So he couldn't quit crying. And so I asked him what he missed about her. He said he was a Christian man. He went to Baptist church. He was teaching a Sunday school class. But I asked him what he missed about her, and through his tears, he told me, and I made a list of all the stuff that he missed about his daughter. And then I explained to him, I said, would you be willing to just say a prayer and give this to God and ask him to take it? And he said, oh yeah, sure. And I led him in prayer, and he prayed and gave it to God. And after he finished the prayer, he just quit crying. We had a nice conversation there and talked. I said, you feel better now? He said, yeah. He went back to his doctor's appointment and finished his doctor's appointment and went home. And didn't have any more trouble with it. Isn't that amazing?
Wow. Yeah.
See? And so for 6 months he had it. And one prayer, it was gone. And he's able to function. So grief can be very debilitating. And I mentioned earlier that they have a form of therapy that came out in 2005 called complicated grief therapy. They present it as like it's a tremendous breakthrough treatment approach. And it involves 16 weeks of therapy, talking continually every day about your grief and what you miss about the people and stuff like that. And you do this every day and every day and every day, even when it hurts. And can you imagine doing it for 16 weeks? Well, that's why 25% of the people dropped out. And out of all those that remain, which amounts to 37% of the total original group, about half of them, of those that remained, said they felt much better. But what I see with people with complicated grief is that usually after one session, it's just gone. 100%, say. So which would you prefer, 16 weeks or one session? Yeah, there's pain, there's crying that goes on, but this is what God does. This is what Jesus does, see. And so it's amazing. Grief fact number 5 is this. The Lord wants to carry your grief. Here's a few scriptures to think about. Psalms 35 says, weeping may last for the night, but a shout of joy comes in the morning. Amen. Isaiah 53:4 says, surely he has borne our griefs. All right? Now usually when we sing those songs and talk about this scripture, we think, well, Jesus bore our sins, which he did. But what the scripture actually says is, he has borne our griefs. He has carried our sorrows. See? That's a good scripture to cling to when you consider grief. Well, in John 16:20, Jesus had just told his disciples that he's fixing to leave. He didn't tell them where he was going or what was going to happen. He just said he has to leave. And then he says this, you will grieve, but your grief will be turned into joy. Now notice he didn't rebuke them. He didn't say you shouldn't be crying. If you really had faith, you'd be able to accept this. He didn't say anything like that. He said, you will grieve, but your grief will be turned into joy. Whenever a woman is in labor, she has pain, but when she gives birth to a child, she no longer remembers the anguish because of a joy that a child has been born. And 2 Thessalonians 3:16 says, may the Lord of peace grant you his peace continually in all circumstances. Do you think the word all might include grief? I do. See, we've got lots of scriptures here that say that we shouldn't have to live with this grief the rest of our life. Nothing wrong with feeling it, but we don't have to hang on to it for a long time. The Lord wants to take it from us. One of my favorite stories is about a woman that worked at this mental health center that I went to once a week. And I didn't know this lady. I just passed her in the hallways, and we'd say good morning and smile at each other, and that was the extent of our relationship. And about 2 years ago after Thanksgiving, I passed this woman in the hallway, and I said, good morning. She said, good morning. I said, how was your Thanksgiving? And she said, oh, it was wonderful. It was good. We had a good time, had the whole family over, had a nice meal. And she said, but I'm not looking forward to Christmas. I said, really? Why is that? She said, oh, I don't like Christmas. I said, well, is there a reason for it? Did something happen? She said, yeah. She said, 60 years ago, my mother died on Christmas. And every time Christmas comes around, I get sad. And I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I know it can take a long time to get over grief. I said, but, I've learned a simple way to help people get rid of grief. And if you're interested, you let me know. I'll be glad to sit down with you and share with you. She said, yeah, I'd like to do that sometime. So the following week, when I went back to that same clinic, she called me. She said, I'm ready. I said, let's sit down, let's talk. So I took her to my office, and I asked her what happened, what the story was, and she said, I grew up in Taiwan. And she said, my mom was my best friend. We talked about everything. She said, she's very, very loving. And when I moved from Taiwan to the United States, she said, it was very hard. She said, but I stayed in touch, through mail and computers and so forth. I don't know if they had computers back then, but she stayed in touch with her mom as best as she could. She said one day her sister called her and said, Mom is very sick, you need to come home. So she went and bought herself a plane ticket, was ready to go home, but before she got on the plane, she got another phone call. Her sister said, Mom just passed away. So she didn't get to say her goodbyes. She didn't get her closure. And for the following 16 years, she was grieving. She couldn't stand Christmas time because of the pain that was connected to the loss of her mother. So she shared that with me, and I said, I said, there's 2 things you got to do to get rid of grief. You guys know it by now, I hope. Step number 1 is what? Be honest, make a list of what you miss about the person, okay? And number 2, say a prayer and give it to God. I asked her if she'd be willing to do that. She said, well, yeah. She said, I'm a Christian. And so I said, okay. I said, I've got this long. I said, tell me what you miss about your mother. And we made a long list of stuff that she missed about her. And then I said, okay, would you be willing to say a prayer now and give that to God? She said, yes. And so I led her in a prayer, and I went down that whole list. And as she repeated that to me, she did it in Thai. And she wept through the whole thing. She cried through every item. All that pain was still there, see. She talked through it. At the end, I said, okay. I said, Lord, she repeated this prayer. I said, Lord, right now I choose to give this to you, and I ask you, please take this from me. In Jesus' name. And then I said to her, I said, okay, how do you feel now when you think about your mother? I said, think about her and tell me how you feel. She said, I feel good. She said, I feel peaceful, I feel calm. And I said, good. I said, now think about her and try to stir it up. And she tried. She said, no, I feel good, I feel peaceful. I said, okay, that's great. And I said, what do you think about that? She said, you know, I've been here 16 years. I can't believe nobody's told me how to do this. I said, I know. I said, not very many people know how to do this. And so she got rid of that. And the following week when I went back to that clinic, I decided to check on her. So I went to her office and knocked on her door. She opened the door and she was wearing a Santa hat. And I said, how you doing? She just smiled. She didn't say a word, just pointed up her hat. She said, you know what? She said, I went out this week and I bought a Christmas tree. And I'm looking forward to Christmas. A month after Christmas, I went back there again. I checked on her. And knocked on her door. She opened the door. I said, how are you doing now? How was your Christmas? She said, oh, it was good. We had a very good time. Wonderful time for Christmas. And she said, this last week, my husband went out and he started to take down the lights from the house. And I said, no, leave him alone. She wanted to celebrate a little bit longer, like she'd been there for 16 years. And this woman who had that grief for 16 years got rid of that in one session. Now, that's not the skill of Jim Gardner, see. That's the power of God. Amen. He gets the glory from that, see. And every one of you can do as effectively as I can. At first, you may not have the confidence, but the more you do it, the more you see it works. Okay, it works. People get rid of grief. Don't send them to the professional counselors because they do not know how to help. And the main thing they'll do is put you on medication. And it's not going to do you much good. There's all kinds of adverse side effects that you're going to get from that, see. And so, the Lord can do for you and me what no counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist, or medication can do. He can give you peace, see, through prayer. And that's an awesome, awesome message. Now, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit here. I'm going to skip several of these slides, and there's one down a little further about when they still feel badly. I'm going to share with you how to distinguish between grief and sadness. Okay, now grief is what you miss about someone. That's what you miss about somebody. So when you make a list of your grief, you write, I miss this, I miss that, okay? Sometimes people, in addition to that, they feel sadness about a loss. Not because of things they miss, because it's just sad, okay? I had a lady, there was a Sunday school class I was doing, I was trying to teach some people how to do this. You know, it was a small group, about 4 women, and my wife and I. And each week I would ask them, I'd say, anybody want to try it? Anybody want to pray about some grief? Nobody volunteered. I mean, most churches, you can't get anybody to shed a tear. You know, you can't get anybody to volunteer or something like that because they want to look like they got it all together. And so for 3 or 4 weeks, nobody volunteered. And finally one week, this lady came in holding a big binder, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't pay much attention to it. But when I asked, I said, anybody want to pray today? She said, yeah, okay, I'm ready. And she opened up this notebook, and it was a photo album. And she started showing us pictures of this close friend of hers that had died just a few weeks earlier. She was a close friend of hers, and she had cancer. She had 3 kids and a husband. And this woman, a friend of mine from the Sunday school class, I spent a lot of time with her in her last days. And when she died on her deathbed, this woman sat beside her and held her hand and watched her pass away into eternity. And this woman was scared to death that she's going to hell. My friend did her best to try to, explain to her the gospel and how she would be sure of her salvation, but she was frightened when she passed away. So my friend was traumatized by that. And I said, okay. I said, let's make a list of what you miss about her. And we made a list of that, her grief, what she missed about her. She gave it to God. And I said, okay, Lord, is there anything you wanted to know? Nothing happened. And I said, how do you feel now when you think about your friend? And she broke down and started crying again. And I said, well, what are you feeling right now? What's that emotion? And she said, I just think, how sad it is that this woman's not going to be able to see her kids grow up. And the kids are going to have to grow up without their mom. Husband's going to have to raise the kids all on his own. And she said, all that makes her sad. See? So what she was experiencing was not grief, it was sadness. So you see, it's similar, but it's a different emotion. So when you deal with sadness, though, it's the same principle. Just identify what they missed. I mean, not what they missed, but why they're sad. We made up a list of the reason for her sadness. And then we prayed a second time and gave that to God. And this time I said, okay, how do you feel now? And she said, I feel calm, I feel peaceful, I feel good. She had to get rid of the grief first, and then the sadness, and then she's okay. You see how that works? So sometimes you got to look for some other emotion besides grief. They may get rid of all that grief, but it has some other emotions you got to identify. And so we did that with sadness. She got rid of grief and sadness. And then she was okay. A week later, she told us, she said, I'm good. She said, I haven't been crying anymore, and I'm feeling good. A year later, she came to us and said, hey, I'll tell you what happened. She said, they had a memorial service for my friend, and they invited me over. It was an annual, 1 year after her death. And she said, they asked me to sing a song, and I sang without any problem. I didn't get choked up, I didn't cry, I didn't break down. So she got rid of all that grief and the sadness that she had for the loss of her friend. But you need to understand the difference between grief and sadness, so that when you pray with them about the grief, then you look to see if there's any sadness that you might need to deal with as well. So it's important to understand that. Now, there's some other feelings connected to grief, and sometimes there may be some anger. When somebody loses somebody, there may be some anger. They may love that person, they may miss them, and they get rid of the grief, but you know, there's some things about them that they really were angry about. Maybe they were abusive to us. Might have been an alcoholic husband, you know. There's some anger. And so at that point, then you need to deal with the anger as well. We're going to talk about anger next, so I'm not going to go into that much. It's the same process, but we're going to talk about that here separately. And then sometimes you've got to deal with shame, and we're going to deal with that a little later too. Shame is just a feeling that I'm dirty, bad, I'm shameful, I'm no good, those kind of feelings. Okay, we will talk about that here in another session coming up. Let me just end with this story. I was teaching a class like this. I was teaching a group about this size at a Baptist church up in Kansas. And after doing the teaching, I often like to ask for volunteers. Now, we're not going to have time for that today, probably, but I'd like to ask for volunteers. And then somebody, brave person who's hurting, wants some help, and we'll bring them up and give them a microphone. We'll sit up and we'll talk, and I'll pray and give a demonstration, because I know it works. I'm not afraid it's not going to work. It always works. And got a name in from Michelle, because she's done a lot of this, and she's done it over and over and over again, and it works. Oh, she just prayed somebody here. I think James was praying somebody too. It works, folks. And it doesn't take a PhD to do this. So this lady volunteered. I mean, when I said, is anybody that would like to volunteer? She was sitting in the back row, and she threw her hand up real fast. And I said, okay, come on up. She came up, introduced herself, and she's kind of shy, but I said, what do you need prayer about? She said, well, my brother, he committed suicide 2 years ago. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, now, when you think about your brother, what kind of feelings do you have? And see, that's where it starts. What kind of emotions do you have when you think about it? How do you feel? She said, well, I miss him. That's grief. He said, I'm angry at him. Usually when there's a suicide, there's anger. You're angry at the person. And she said, I feel sad. You know, there's real sad things that he died so young. Lots of things. And felt shameful. She felt shameful. She felt guilty. So I said, okay, well, let's start with them one at a time. We talked about the grief, made a list, gave it to God, got rid of the grief. And then we talked about the anger. She had anger toward her brother, toward her parents. And we made a list of those and gave that to God. She got rid of her anger. And she felt sadness, and we got rid of that. Did one at a time. And finally the shame. She felt shameful and bad because she felt like she should have tried harder. She should have done this, she should have done that, see. She should have done better sister to him. And we gave that to God, and I'll tell you how that process works. It's a little different process, but it's very effective and very simple too. She got rid of it all. As everybody sat and watched, they saw her get set free from all those emotions. Immediately afterwards, she and her husband drove to the cemetery where his brother was buried. And then they came back, and the pastor asked her, how'd it go? He said, God is awesome. That's all she could say, God is awesome. And I've seen her since then. She had total peace. She didn't have that gut-wrenching grief or anger or shame, nothing there. It was peace and calm. But all I do is just take one emotion at a time, help them resolve that, move to the next one, until it's all gone, see? And that's the way the process works. So yeah, sometimes there are other emotions that are connected to the grief that you got to deal with. And we're going to take a break here in just a moment. Let me finish with a few verses here. The biblical basis for this method. We've already gone over some of these. Additional one is Matthew 5:4 says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Now I know that mourning could be a spiritual mourning, and it could be repentance, but it can also include the literal meaning of mourning, which is to mourn the loss of somebody. 1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your cares upon him, because he cares for you." And then Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians that you will not grieve. You should not grieve as the rest who have no hope. And one other verse, actually, Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and peace. Now, if you're full of grief, how can you have peace? You ever thought about that? You can't have peace when you're full of anger. You can't have peace when you're full of greed. When you're full of depression, you don't have peace. So the implication of the fruits of the Spirit is that He wants us to have peace, and we can have peace in our life, regardless of the circumstances. We have bad things, trouble things that happen, but the Lord doesn't want us to get stuck in those bad ones. He wants to take it from us and carry that for us and give us His peace. And the test is when you can think about that person that you lost, talk about them, and there's nothing there but peace and calm. And I see that all the time with people. It's real. God wants us to have peace. And so I'm going to cut things short here on this section, and just ask this. When you all think about the tragic events of 1 week ago, do you feel any sadness? How many of you feel sadness? Okay. But let me just try something here. I'm used to doing this one-on-one, but you can do this as a group sometime, okay? What are the things that make you sad about that situation? Just shout out anything that makes you sad. The pain of other people? And the families that are suffering, okay? What else? The losses. I'm sorry? Hopelessness. And how about the fear that people experience and so forth? Okay. Anything else that stands out that is sad?
Young people.
Young people. There were women. Children. What else? The evil. There brought some anger there too. There's some sadness, okay? That evil can have this kind of impact on people. It's sad how it has affected so many people in Las Vegas and around the world. There are people all around the world who are feeling sadness. You know, this morning, I talked with Kevin last night and saw him get healing. I was remembering some of the things he shared, and I began thinking about that. This morning while I was sitting, kind of collecting my thoughts, I thought, boy, it's sad. I felt some sadness, you know. And I talked to the Lord. I said, Lord, this makes me sad to think about this and this and this. And I prayed to God. But let me just try to, we've taken a few things. You might have to do this a little more individually for yourself and make a list of everything makes you sad. But let me just say a little prayer. And say it kind of in your heart with me. And let's just give it all to God right now and see what happens. Heavenly Father, when I think about this tragedy a week ago here, it makes me sad. Lord, it makes me sad that just the carnage and the fear, the terror that people experience for it, the damage that is done to so many families' lives. Lord, it makes me sad that so many young people lost their lives and were damaged emotionally. It makes me sad, Lord, that this had such an impact upon this community and upon the world. It makes me sad to think of the parents who lost their children, and the husbands that lost their wives, and wives that lost their husbands. But Lord, all these things, they do make me sad, but I'm tired of carrying this. Lord, right now I choose to give this sadness to you. And I ask you, please take it from me and carry it for me. I give it all to you right now in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, let me pray for you, Lord. Is there anything right now that you want these people to know? Just be very quiet and see what thoughts come into your mind. Anybody have any thoughts come to your mind?
God of peace.
He's God of peace, okay?
Jesus is coming back.
Jesus is coming back.
Hope.
Hope. Any other thoughts? He's the overcomer. I'm here now. Jesus is with us. Any other thoughts? I'm sorry, couldn't hear.
A complete total lack of all those feelings I feel plenty.
You feel that right now?
Like
Okay, all right. How many of you have sensed a change in your emotions here since we prayed? How many? Yeah, many of you have, okay? Now, there may be a little sadness now, but look, if there's sadness, it doesn't mean you didn't hit on the head something else that makes you sad. So make a list of your own and give it God, okay? You see what happens? You learn how to identify that feeling and give it God. He takes it. Do the same thing. If you've lost somebody, a person, a friend, or somebody, through this, make a list of everything you miss about them. Give that to God. Watch what happens because it's a miracle. I don't know what's strong because the mental health system can't do this for you. I couldn't even do it for you. But Jesus can do it for us. We don't just hear it or we just don't know how to give it to Him. And that's what I'm trying to teach you, how to give it to God, how to be explicit, and to give it to Him. That's the only word. It works a miracle. Praise God for what He's done here today. Okay? Let's take a break. We'll come back together and talk a little bit about anger. Thank you, folks. We're going to have a second time. We're going to stick in your wallet. I carry it with me all the time because every place I go, I run into people that are hurting. Every place I go, there's hurting people. I look for life opportunities when they're looking for them. And so I love to carry these. And you can help yourself to one of each of these for free. If you want to buy more, they're $5, $5. Help yourself to sample and see if it's something that you might want to use. We're going to talk about anger now. But let me just say that if you have to go, just use this with yourself. Start with yourself. Any losses you have, go through the procedure on your own. You don't have to have somebody do this with you. Okay? You can do it on your own. But once you do that, then you can share that testimony with other people. And that's a powerful way to lead into it. Don't force it on, but just say, hey, you know what, I found a way to get rid of my grief. If you're interested, I'd love to share with you. So share what happened. Okay? Start with yourself, get rid of that. And then you can share with friends, grandkids, children, neighbors, church, friends, and so forth. So use it. And if all you get out of this whole training session today is just this one thing, that's wonderful. That's awesome. You can help a lot of people. Everybody goes with grief. Grief is, and I didn't go over this, some of the consequences of grief, but grief is the #1 cause of depression. Did you know that? Most people don't know that. Professionals don't know that, but it is. And I can show you the research on that. 87% of all depression is caused by some kind of loss. If you get out people lost, you end up with depression. See? That's why we've got so many people who are on antidepressants that are very ineffective. A lot of bad side effects. They lead to mania. They lead to another diagnosis of mania. Bipolar disorder many times because they first of all got on antidepressants. So lots of things here. But you can help people get set free from grief, and many times that will take care of all depression. So we're going to talk about anger now. And I'm going to share with you how I first began to use the same principle with anger. I was working at another group home at the same time in Tennessee. And there was a young man there that they asked me to counsel. And so I sat down one time and I asked him what he wanted help with. And he said, my anger. I said, okay, you got an anger problem? He said, yes. I said, well, give me an example of something recently, sometime recently you got angry. He said, oh, I got mad last weekend. He said there was another board here at the house that said something to me, made me mad. And I got in his face and I was ready to jump on him. And the staff came rushing in real fast and got between us and separated us. And he said, I was so mad I couldn't calm down. It took me 30 minutes to calm down. And then the next day it happened again. Another boy at the home said something to him, made him mad. He got in his face and he was ready to punch him. The staff came rushing in real fast and separated them. And it took him another 30 minutes to calm down. So he gave that as an example about how he had an anger problem. I said, okay. I said, let me ask you this. I said, if you could get rid of your anger, would you like to? Again, I always ask that because I don't assume that they want to get rid of that anger. Sometimes they don't. But most of the time, a person's coming for counseling, they do. So I said, oh, he said, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, let me ask you this. I said, first of all, when is the first time that you can remember getting really angry like this? And just instantly, without any time to think about it, he said, 8 years old. I said, what happened when you were 8 years old? He said, when I was 8 years old, he said, my parents were divorced and all of us kids lived with mom. And sometimes my mom would take me and my little brother to Dad's house and drop us off and we'd hang out with him and we'd play. And she'd come back, get us and take us home. He said, one day when I was 8 years old, my mom took me and my little brother to Dad's house and dropped us off at his house. And she said, I'll be right back. Just go to the station down here in the corner and get some cigarettes. And then I'll come back and get you. So she took off and they started playing. And they played for a little while. And then they paused. They looked up to see if mom was on her way. And they couldn't see her. So they kept on playing. They played all afternoon. And then it started getting dark outside. He said, at some point in there, I realized my mom wasn't coming back. He said, that was the last day I ever saw my mom when he was 8 years old. He said, I was so mad. He said, I stayed mad for 2 solid years. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about school. I started skipping school. I started getting into fights. And I started drinking and using drugs. And I said, well, you know what? I don't blame you for being mad. I'd be mad too. If my mother did that to me, I'd be mad. My mother didn't do that to me, but I would be mad. See, there's nothing wrong with being angry. And I said, I said that 9 years ago. I said, you want to stay mad? He said, no, I'm tired of getting mad. I'm tired of all the trouble I get into when I get mad. I said, okay. I said, I can show you how to get rid of that. I said, there's 2 things you've got to do to get rid of your anger. Number 1, you've got to be honest. Okay? Same principles as we talked about with grief. You've got to be honest. By being honest, I mean, let's make up a list of why you're mad at your mom. I said, why are you mad at your mom? He said, well, I'm mad at her because she lied to me. I'm mad at her because she abandoned me. He said, I'm mad at her because I haven't even seen her once in the last 9 years. That's all you can think of. You didn't have a long list, just 3 things, that's all you can think of. I said, well, it's a short list, but it's a good, honest list. So now, that's the first step in getting rid of anger. The second step is, would you be willing to say a prayer and ask God to take that from you? He said, yes, I'm tired of this anger. I said, okay, good. So I led him in prayer, and he went like this. He said, Lord, when I think about my mother, it makes me mad. That's just being honest. I said there's nothing wrong. That's not dishonoring parents. It's just talking to God and being honest. It makes me mad when I think about my mother. And Lord, it makes me mad because she lied to me, because she abandoned me, and because she hadn't even called me once in the last 9 years. He said, but I'm tired of being angry. Right now, I choose to give it to you. I ask you, please take it from me in Jesus' name. When he finished that prayer, I said, okay, think about your mother and tell me how you feel now. He sat there and he thought, he said, I don't feel angry. I said, well, good. I said, no, I want you to think about that day. And I said, I don't always trust it when people say that. So I said, I want you to think about your mom and that day she abandoned you. You try to stir it up. He sat there and he thought about the mom and tried to stir it up. I said, how do you feel? He said, I don't feel any anger anymore. I said, well, good. And then he said, you know what? I haven't seen my mom for 9 years. I'd like to see her again. And when he said that, it shocked me. I wasn't quite ready for that fast. And I said, well, I know you're going home this weekend to see your dad. Why don't you talk to him about that? See if that could be arranged for you to see your mom again. So he went home that weekend, and he told his dad he'd like to see his mother again. And his dad about had a heart attack. Because he knew how mad this boy was, see. But he came back to the group home after that weekend, and I asked him how he did. He said he didn't feel any anger. The anger was over. You know what amazed me was this young man, he was blowing up all the time and exploding. The explosive temper he had was gone. It was gone. You know why? Because we went to the source where the anger started, identified the reasons, and gave it to God, and that anger toward his mom was gone. And his behavior changed. See, we went to the root where it started. I didn't just pray with him about that young man that he wanted to punch, because that wasn't really where the anger is coming from. Most of the time, the anger is coming from earlier, see? Does that make sense? It's earlier. You got to go back and find out where you first got that, see? You pray about it, you give it to God, and he takes it from you. And then what I tell people after that is, now think of another person you're mad at. Let's do it with them, see? And get rid of them one by one. As you do that, that anger goes away. Now, doesn't that sound simple? Everybody in here is capable of doing that, see? What I love about this is I can remember two things. That's about my limit, see, two things. Sometimes I can remember three things. I can remember the 4 spiritual laws, you know. I stretch it that far, but 2 things. You remember that. That's pretty simple. So, the steps for releasing anger are basically the same as what we had to read. First of all, be completely honest about your feelings of anger by making a detailed list of why you're angry. And secondly, tell the Lord why you're angry about the person and ask Him to take your anger from you and carry it for you. And then there's a note here. Repeat that. These steps for everyone else you haven't been angry for in the past. The impact of anger. You know, AA says in their good book that anger and resentment is the number 1 offender for alcoholics. But you know what? It's also the number 1 offender for the rest of us. It's the number 1 offender in most churches, most Christians. Lots of Christians have a lot of anger they won't admit to, but it's there. And you see it in those subtle ways sometimes. So it's very important. It has a tremendous impact. Anger is not a mental disorder. You won't find it in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's not in there. Anger is just emotions. And but anger oftentimes does lead or contribute to a diagnosis of depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD, or intermittent explosive disorder, and other disorders listed in the manual. Anger leads to adolescent rebellion, leads to family problems, leads to marital problems, leads to drug abuse, it leads to antisocial behavior. It leads to what happened last Sunday night. Anger creates chaos and violence in the world. You know what? Our country, our government doesn't know what to do about anger. They don't know what to do about violence. You know where it comes from? Violence always comes from anger. It comes from anger. And yet our mental health people do not know how to help with anger. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I'll show you. As simple as this is, you think you can figure it out. I was a Christian counselor for 25 years before. I didn't figure it out myself. I had to learn from somebody else. Because it was simple, it was powerful. I had to learn from somebody else. I had a couple come to me. The husband was an alcoholic. And they came for counseling after he had abused his wife in a drunken ways. He abused her very badly. And he came pretty remorseful. He told his wife, he begged her, please don't leave me. I would never drink again if you won't leave me. And you know what? He kept that promise at the time that I saw him. And yet his wife was still afraid of him because he still had the anger. And he would grow up and she became frightened of it, see? He still had the anger. So we talked, made a list of reasons why he's angry. He had a lot of grief also. And we dealt with the grief, we dealt with his anger. And that, so he got rid of all that anger. He'd been abused as a child by a number of people, his mother, his father, his grandparents, and so forth. Got rid of all that anger. And the man, his whole life changed. And they got along well. His business began to prosper because he wasn't drinking anymore. People began coming back to him for his business because he was very good at what he did. And I asked his wife before the end of our counseling session, how's he doing? And she said, you know what, he is a sweetheart. This man that abused her, she called a sweetheart. So I can't even remember last time she had a real sweetheart. And that's how God changed him. He got rid of that anger. You know, I mentioned in my earlier story that people have a right to be angry. And I believe that. See, the Bible doesn't say don't be angry. It says be angry and yet do not sin. Ephesians 4:26-27. Be angry yet do not sin. Do not let the sun without your anger. Do not give the devil an opportunity. So it's not wrong to be angry. In fact, Jesus got angry. You know that. Okay. Jesus got angry several times, righteously angry. He didn't stay angry. But the problem is that when we get angry, James 1 says that the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. See, so you're in great danger when you're angry, saying and doing things that you regret later. So you have to be careful not to sin while you're angry. But then it also says, do not let the sun go down your anger. So there's a principle that we have to apply with regard to this. And I've come to believe with all my heart, none of us can afford to stay angry overnight. Can't afford to hold on to anger overnight. I don't care what it is that's happening. And that's what the Bible teaches. So you can be angry. That's what the Lord Jesus modeled for us, isn't it? You know why he's hanging on the cross? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And even though we have a righteous God, you know, he modeled for us that we're not to retain our anger. And we're going to talk some more about that. So understanding anger. I looked at this verse already, quoted it to you, Ephesians 4, 26 and 27. Anger is not wrong most of the time. But the two cautions that Paul gives us are, do not sin and do not let the sun go down your anger. I had a man who came to one of my set-free meetings. We had a small group, about 10, 12 people that would come together every Thursday night. This man came to one of our set-free meetings and for the first time, and he didn't say a word. He just sat and watched. And we were talking about anger on this particular evening, and I asked him for a volunteer if anybody wanted some help with some anger. I had a young man sitting next to me. It was his first time also, and he volunteered. He said, yeah, I need some help. He said, I've got a lot of anger toward my father. And I said, okay. I said, tell me some of the things that make you angry about your father. And he said, well, he was very, very abusive to me when I grew up. And we sat there, and I made a list of all the things that he was in, all the bad things that he could remember his father did. He made a good list. I led him in prayer, he gave it to God, and immediately afterwards it was obvious, you know, his whole countenance changed. And he began to relax and smile. And I said, well, how do you feel now about your dad? He said, well, I feel good. He said, I love him. Even though he treated me bad, I love him. And this man sitting across the table from us watched this, didn't say a word. He just shook my hand and thanked me for it, and he went home. 4 days later, he called me, and he said, I'd like to meet with you. You have time to meet with me sometime today? And I said, sure. He came on over, and he told me, he began to proceed to tell me, he said, you know what? He said, I've been a Christian for 40 years. I've been angry for 40 years. Actually more than that, he said, since I was a child. He said, when I saw what happened last week with that young man that you prayed with, he said, I've been trying everything to get rid of my anger. He said, I've read the scriptures, I've memorized it, you know, I've gone to pastor after pastor, I've gone to counselor after counselor, and just made me mad because he couldn't help me. He got mad about that. He said, when I saw what you did, I went home, and I spent the entire weekend on my knees, confessing to God all the people I was angry at, telling them why I was angry and giving it to God. He said, I felt like a brand new person. 40 years of anger he got rid of on his own. I didn't pray for him one time. He did all on his own because he simply did what I instructed and followed the scripture, and he got rid of that anger. He's a friend now. He's a friend of our ministry. In fact, today, while we're up here, he's covering for me in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and preaching at a homeless church. And so he loves to share with people how God got rid of his anger. See, it's not just a problem in the world, it's a problem with Christians too. And I love what Pastor Jim said this morning. He said, you know what, it's got to start with the church first, because we can't help people out there until we get rid of our pain. Now, how are we've got to teach the world how to get rid of anger unless we get rid of ours first? Does that make sense? I believe it all hinges upon us. The scriptures say that judgment begins with the household of God. That's us. We have to get rid of our anger. But you know what? Not only do we need to do it for the world's sake, we need to do it for our own sake, for our marriages. We need to do it for our children. We need to do it for everything. You know, we want to be more loving people, don't we? But how can you love people when you're angry? You know? You've got to get rid of anger first. See, you've got to have that peace of God in your heart first of all. That's why Paul says in Galatians 5 that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and peace. The first three fruits are emotions. Love, joy, and peace. I think they're foundational to the other 6 qualities. See, you can't have self-control and those other qualities when you don't have peace, when you're full of anger. See? So we've got to get rid of our anger first. Get rid of our anger, experience the peace of God, and then we can love people more. You can love people a whole lot better with your anger. And you have joy too. The joy comes to you as you get rid of anger. See? So it's a very critical thing to learn how to do this. I'm not going to share in depth about this next slide, families of murder victims. But I spoke one Sunday morning in Arkansas, in a little town in Arkansas. I was invited to speak at. And actually at two different churches. I spoke at about one service at one church. And then just down the road about 5 miles, I got in my car and drove down real fast, and they caught their service. I spoke about anger. I told the first church, I said, if there's anybody here who wants to pray now, I'll be available this afternoon. I'll be glad to pray with you. So we had lunch after the second meeting, drove back to the church, and there was a couple people waiting for prayer. Interestingly, both of them were middle-aged women who had children who had been murdered. Both of them. And we prayed about it. We talked about their anger. They gave their anger to God. And their grief, they gave that to God. And when we got done, both of them felt the peace of God. I said, if you had an opportunity to meet this person, how would you feel? They say, well, I wouldn't have any anger for them anymore. And they felt peace. That sounds like a terribly hard thing to do, doesn't it? Humanly speaking, you can't do that. But if you will do what the scriptures say, and you'll be honest with God, you'll give it to Him, He'll take it, He'll take that burden from that. That doesn't mean you just let them get away with it, there's no consequences. Yeah, there are consequences. But you don't have to live under the consequences of that anger the rest of your life, see, when you learn how to give that anger to God. So the Lord can take any kind of anger and replace it. And you may wonder about angry people. We all know angry people. Somebody that's angry now. But it doesn't mean it's a temperamental thing. It's not their Irish blood, nothing like that. It's experiences that they've been through. And no matter who they are or what they've been through, if a person's angry a lot, it's because of things they've been through. Once they learn how to identify those, do those jobs one by one, that anger goes away, and the person is transformed. We've all heard about anger management. In fact, they used to have a TV show, I don't know if they still do it or not, anger management. And anger management is all over the world. And I'll tell you what, it's the only thing that mental health people have to offer for anger. Because anger is not a mental health issue anyway. It's just an emotion state. But anger management, interestingly, is very ineffective. I used to teach anger management, and I hated it because it didn't help anybody. It wasn't effective. And most people in the group were angry at me because they had to be there. So it was not fun. And it didn't help anybody. But here's what anger management researchers say. Psychologist Ray DiGiuseppe, he said he's one of the leaders in the field of anger management. He says anger management classes, I think, are a band-aid. They allow people to feel like they've done something, but they haven't had any kind of real treatment. He did a review in 2003 of 92 anger management treatments, including more than 1,800 people, and he found that the classes can reduce feelings of anger somewhat in people who are motivated to change their behavior. But it doesn't help people who are inmates, it doesn't reduce recidivism rate or anything like that. So it doesn't have any practical impact upon anybody. So anger management does not work, and that's the primary tool that mental health people use. Sometimes they use cognitive therapy, and I was a cognitive therapist for almost 25 years. And it's a pretty practical, common sense approach, but it doesn't help people either, because anger is not usually based upon irrational things or distorted thinking like they teach in cognitive therapy. It's usually based upon bad things that have happened to you. And you have justifiable anger. If you're dealing with an abused person, it doesn't help to sit down and say, it really isn't as bad as you remember it, your dad's not such a bad person. It doesn't help to say that. It just makes them mad, see? But if you teach them how to say, well, you know what, it's okay to be angry. You were abused, that's all right. Do you want to get rid of your anger? And if they do, they say, well, let's make a list of why you're angry. Just give it to God. And when you do that, it's amazing. Sometimes when you pray, I'm skipping one slide back here, but I'm talking about hymns, the healing prayer. If you pray with somebody, if I pray with somebody about their anger, and then afterwards I say, well, how do you feel now? And they say, well, I still feel angry. Two possibilities. Number one, we missed something. There may be some important things that you missed. I say, well, what do you still feel angry about? Make up a second list so you can go through it again. Many times that will take care of it. In some cases, you've got to ask, when is the first time you remember being angry? See, like I did with that young man at the beginning. When is the first time you felt angry? Because you got to go back a little earlier. There's some anger back earlier in your life that that you got to deal with first, because it's bleeding over and all these other things. You got to deal with that anger. Start earlier and get rid of the source, the root. And when you do that, that's when the anger goes away. So those are the two things that happen. If you find that you're still angry afterwards, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. You know, and the first time after you try, you may panic and say, oh, it doesn't work for me, I'm doing something wrong. But no, if you do it, and just identify why they're angry still, make up a list, give it to God, or go back to the source, and you'll find that anger goes away. I'd like to go in the jail, and Michelle goes in jails also. She works with women, and I work with men, and it's fun because you get to meet a lot of people with anger issues and people with other issues and so forth. And they're pretty honest when you get in there, most of them, Unlike many church members, you ask anybody here got an anger problem? Everybody throws their hand up, for the most part. And but I was talking to a group of inmates, about 10 inmates that were in this one pod. And I was talking about anger management. I shared with them that story about that 17-year-old boy. And I said, how many of you guys here have been through anger management? 8 of the 10 raised their hand up. They said they'd all been in anger management. I said, how many of you did it help? Nobody held their hand up. You'll find about 1 out of 100 people will say anger management helped them a little bit. Okay? But for the most part, they all know it doesn't work. And there's a young man standing over to my right. And he said, I got a question. He said, I know I've got an anger problem. He said, the problem is I don't believe in God. And I said, well, that's okay. I said, have you been in anger management? He said, yeah. I said, how many times? He said, 4 times. He was 19 years old. He'd already been in anger management 4 times. I said, did it help you? He said, no. I said, well, let me ask you this. If I could tell you, I could show you how to get rid of your anger through prayer, would you consider that there might be a God? And he said, I shrugged. And that's all I said. I didn't pursue that any further. A couple of days later, when I was back in the jail, I was leaving the jail, and I saw somebody back in the corner cell who was kind of waving their hand at me. I looked up, and it was the same young man. I went over, the jailers opened the door for me, and I stood there and talked with him. And I said, you want to get rid of that anger now? He said, yeah. Well, there's a guy that told me he's an atheist, okay? I said, okay. I said, now there's 2 things you got to do. I said, the first thing is you got to make a list of why you're angry. I said, who are you angry at? He said, my grandpa. I said, okay, why are you mad at your grandpa?
Dennis.
And he proceeded to tell me why he was angry. One thing I do remember is he said, I remember one time he held me down on the ground and my brother came down. And he made a list of 7 reasons why he's angry with his grandpa. I said, okay, now we got the reasons here. Now the second thing that you have to do to get rid of your anger is, would you be willing to say a prayer, a sincere prayer, and ask God to take it back? He said, yes. I said, okay. And I read through the list. He repeated after me. We prayed. We gave his anger to God. And after that, I said, okay. I said, think about your grandma now and tell me how you feel. And he just stood there and thought. He didn't say anything. I said, okay, well, that's how you feel. He said, I don't feel anything. So you mean to tell me 5 minutes ago you hated your grandma and you don't feel anything right now? I said, yeah. I said, well, what happened to your anger? And that's what he did.
Come on.
I said, do you think there might be a God? I said, yeah. The next day I went back in there, got him out of his cell, went across in another room and sat him at a table. And I had a friend of mine that goes to jail too. And I asked him, I said, so how's that anger today? He said, I don't have any anger today. I said, really? I said, what do you think about that? He said, that's amazing. So I said, well, let me ask you this. If you could be 100% sure that you're going to heaven, would you like to? He said, yeah. I told my friends, tell him how you can do that. He shared the gospel with him, and this young man prayed and received Christ. Isn't that amazing? See, we didn't approach him in a standard way with the gospel. He wasn't receptive. He was an atheist. But when he saw the power of God that set him free from something that no man could set him free from, he knew there was a God. And I see this many times with people. See, and a lot of times people think, well, that can't be true. We know that God doesn't hear sinners. I mean, yeah, there's a scripture that says that our sin separates us from God. Yeah, that's true. But you know what it also says in Matthew chapter 5, I believe. Yeah, he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. He sends the sun shines on the evil and the good. God does good things for bad people, like Jim was saying this morning. See, And not only that, but there's a place in John chapter 5 where Jesus heals a man, and this man didn't even know who he was. The Pharisees, they came and asked him, he said, who healed you? I don't know who he was. Until he bumped up to him in the temple, then he realized who he was. It wasn't dependent upon his faith. Jesus just healed him because of his goodness. And he knows that when you heal people, that many times they'll turn to him. See, people see the power of God, they see the compassion and love of God when they get set free, and then they're receptive to praying and going to church and growing to know this awesome God that just set them free. See?